Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Go Blue with Stu on the Field of 68 Network. I am your host, Stu Douglass. Today with us is Clayton Sayfie, writer and social for the Wolverine on 3 Network. Clayton, what's going on, man?
Not a whole lot. Thanks for having me. Big thrill to be here. I was telling you off air, of course, that you helped out some of my high school days. Being able to talk some trash to some Sparty friends and everything. So this is a huge thrill for me watching you, back in the day and everything, and following what you're doing. So,
there's nothing worse. I that makes me very proud of what we did and like be able to help you with that, because there's nothing worse than like being in a room full of your rivals and not necessarily like getting to hear the trash talk or getting to talk the trash, but
yeah.
you like receiving it is the worst thing in the entire world. I hate losing way more than winning. Like I didn't want to talk trash as much as I just didn't want to hear it from other people, and especially with Michigan State, it's like the worst.
100%. Like, so I grew up in Grand Rapids, and it's basically West Lansing over there. Like,
Yeah,
there's so many Sparties, and that's the thing. Like, I wouldn't really talk much when Michigan would win. You'd kind of come back with stuff, but maybe I talked a little bit after that win just because it felt so good. I think because Michigan needed that, as you know. And but no, fantastic. I totally agree though. It's to shut them up, and if you need to, you kind of come back with something for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And off air, you were saying that you remember in like Manny Harris days a little bit before, so you've seen like the rise. You've been there. You felt the beginning a little bit, like the perfect kind of fandom where like you get into it and you feel that pain, and then you get the rise. It's not like I had fans like growing up like Yankee fan, or some friends growing up like Yankee fans, and it's like, yeah, we just win. Like that's not as fun. I feel like it's fun to get that whole rise the whole way.
No, yeah, the way up is really fun. I think Michigan fans are kind of experiencing it a little bit more the last couple of years in football too, where it's like we're doing this for the first time. Like if you're a fan, and I know we talked to so many the last 2 years in Arizona and Miami at the playoff, it's like these people are like, this is so much fun. Like this is what we were missing out on. So it's the same thing with basketball. Like I remember, towards the end of Amaker, and it was kind of like just a given. Like Michigan just like lost. Like you play Minnesota, you play Iowa, play Michigan State. Like they just kind of lost just about every game. Not every game, but and they were competitive in some years and everything. But you didn't expect much out of the basketball program until Coach B got there, and you guys turned things around in that season that we're talking about with your shot, right? So that's the fun stuff, I think, is that rise. And Michigan basketball, and I'm sure we'll talk about it as well, but like they had a couple different rises under John Beilein. They had a good couple years here under Juwan Howard so far, and we could see it happen again here soon as well. I know this year's been disappointing for a lot of people, but I totally agree with you. It's the way up, and it does hurt when you're in the moment and you lose a national title game if you're a Michigan fan.
Yeah.
But when you put things in perspective, it's like, man, how far we've come and everything. That's it's incredible.
Yeah, it's winning in college sports is so hard in general, let alone a championship. So many things have to go your way, and I hope that the fans can enjoy where the program is at. I mean, my freshman year, and let's say my sophomore year, we had a bad team. Football program was just basically just up and down in shambles. I mean, it was exciting at times with Denard, but it was in shambles all the way through with the decisions they were making, and never like giving anybody a chance to really build a program there. Like you saw the bottom, and it's not a great feeling. And the rumbles of fire Beilein back when I was there, obviously weren't a good idea. They panned out that they kept them, and the same with Juwan. And we'll get into that. You know what? Let's just start out with it. Let's start out with Juwan and all of this, because it's a perfect segue of one, giving time, and two, like be happy where you're at. And those are very tough things in college basketball. But what do you make of these rumbles? Now they're mostly, I think, squeaky wheel gets the oil type of situation on social media. And I would be shocked if they were thinking this inside the athletic department. But like, what do you make of this? Just kind of par for the course for a fandom, or like do you see some points there? Like, what do you make of all of it?
Yeah, well, one, it speaks to how well this program has performed over the last decade plus. because you're at this spot. I do think it's a vocal minority, a lot of them on Twitter, so I try to ignore it. You get replies to tweets when you tweet out an article, or like you just tweet about the game. Anthony Broom, who I work with, tweeted something out about the last game, or no, after the Purdue game, and someone was like, just stick to football or whatever. And it's like, well, it's basketball season. I'm at the basketball game. I'm going to tweet about basketball. So it's just like kind of people that are miserable online. No offense to those people, still love you. But, so I think part of it's that. But at the same time, like pressure is building a little bit for Juwan Howard. I mean, they have 19 wins last year. I think they really saved that season by going to the Sweet 16. But throughout, it was a really rocky ride. They went like a month and a half, win one, lose one, win one, lose one, that sort of thing, treaded water for a while, and then they get it done down the stretch enough to make the tournament. Then they make their run. This year, I mean, you have the injury to Jalen Llewellyn, you have, just adversity throughout the season. I feel like with a young team, and that's playing into it. A lot of the struggles, how fickle this team is. You don't really know what you're going to get on a night in, night out basis.
Yep.
And it's year 4 under Juwan Howard. I think people are looking at that as, hey, this is your team now. This is the roster that you constructed. And to me, I think the biggest issue with this team is the roster that he constructed. He has missed on a couple guard, prospects. I'm not saying, some of these guys are the second or third option, but that's just kind of the way it goes in college basketball recruiting. You don't get somebody, you move on. There's kind of that domino effect, as you know. So, I think it's going to take time with, especially in the backcourt, which is so important. And then, I just think that, things just haven't come together. You've had maybe a couple recruiting misses or a few guys on this roster that I feel like if you put them in a game, they don't do a ton for you. But to me, I don't think he's on the hot seat or anything like that. I think that next year is going to be a big season for him. I think that when you look back, and you spoke about how John Beilein had that. I mean, I think I tweeted this at you the other day because you were talking about this online, and I said people were calling for Beilein's job not just after year 3 or 4. It was after during the 2017 season as well. They ended up going to the Sweet 16.
I didn't realize that. Yeah,
finished strong. Yeah. People were saying, not hot seat or like fire him now, but it's like this thing's going in the wrong direction because 15 they missed the tournament, 16 they're in the first 4. And then 17, they got off to a 1-5 start in the Big Ten, something that no one can ever come back from. I think you're the last guy that would believe that, right?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It was in a similar spot. So you got to remember that. John Beilein also tells the story about how he went to, I think it was year 4 or 3 or one of those Big Ten media days. And he told his wife, Kathleen, that this may be my last Big Ten media days. I don't know if we're going to get through this. And the administration believed in him. They stuck with him. They saw his vision. They saw the guys he was recruiting. They saw that this thing can work, and obviously it did. So I think Juwan Howard deserves more time, clearly. And next year probably won't even be like the do or die year. I think next year would be more of a, pressure would be on. It's like, hey, you kind of got to win here. If you miss a tournament, let's say 2 straight years, then you're in a little bit of trouble. But that's thinking too far ahead. I think in a little hypothetical. But I think the pressure is building. But I don't think that there is necessarily a hot seat situation that we're on, despite what some of the people on Twitter will tell you.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And I mentioned it on Twitter in that thread a little bit that was after Beilein had 30 years of experience of being a head coach. And Juwan's been in basketball, sure, but you don't really know what it's like to be on the other side. As a player, you can think, this is what I would do if I were a coach. This is what I would do. This had game plan different. But there's a lot more that goes into all of it, right? I mean, that's with anything in life. The first time you do it, you're like, oh, shit, like this is actually a lot more than I thought. And Juwan's been dealing with different roster makeups the entire time. Like that first year, his kind of freestyle, throw the ball up, play some defense. You guys should know what we're doing. We're like high level concepts here at the NBA stuff, X's and O's wise. But like, you had Livers, you had Franz, Hunter freshman year. I think this is Juwan's second year. That was Juwan's second year. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. But that early success, that team was well built, well oiled. Like they were veteran. I mean, Livers was just a dog. Like he was amazing, I think, through and through. Even as a leader, I think he was a little underappreciated in that sense. But my point is, this roster's tough. So yeah, this is on Juwan a little bit to build up. There's a Frankie Collins situation. He should be the point guard this year. What happened there? He should have. Maybe that's not all on Juwan. Sometimes people's inner circles just suck. But
yeah,
this is a growing pain. Like, I feel like you have to lose. Beilein always said it, and it's always true. Like, you learn more from a loss than you do a win. Always, just forever and always. And it doesn't have to be game to game. This season can be a loss in terms of like, okay, I have to learn how to deal with young kids and teach this better in the preseason and be able to hammer this and be like, this is where we were flawed in January. Well, like, just like down the list of all these things he hasn't really had to fully deal with yet, because of like how the roster's been built. I think that next year, like you said, building up the backcourt especially is going to be huge. I'm so excited for Doug and Kobe. I want to get into more of that specific, but I think building that up, you can't win without a backcourt. And you got three guys, 1, 2, and 3 spot that are all pretty much playing major minutes for the first time. I mean, Kobe played a little bit last year, but this is the first real experience of getting that and having this responsibility on his shoulders. I mean, dude, I could not tell you how hard that is as a freshman or a sophomore doing that. One, just like playing the right way, how I did, like, don't make mistakes and hit open shots. And for them, it's like, go run the offense and shoulder the offensive load and go create for others and then go play defense on the other end. There's so many elements that come into how difficult that is. But yeah, I building this up is going to be key for next year. Just see that improvement. And I really do believe this. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to ask you. I think Doug and Kobe could be all Big Ten. I don't know if it's next year or when they ever do it, but I think at least one of the years individually they can get all Big Ten. And I think they're going to be like, teams are just going to have a headache with those two going forward. And let's cross your fingers that they stay in the backcourt for the next 2 years.
I agree. Second half of the Purdue game, my dad and my brother were there, so I went down and sat with them, seat empty. And my brother Mitch is a big Doug McDaniel fan. And we were watching Doug, like, just kind of closely because we were just talking about him. And we were like, even his mistakes are kind of fun to watch. And that he's going to get those out of his system at some point. I've been a Doug McDaniel fan since I saw him a couple summers ago down in Atlanta at an AAU tournament. I like his mental makeup. I really like, the chip he has on his shoulder. He's undersized, but he plays bigger. He's had his ups and downs. It feels like it's one good game, one bad game with him. He disappeared against Penn State on Sunday, but I like Doug. And then that takes me, and I like Kobe as well. I've been a Kobe fan too. And you got to remember, with Kobe Buffkin, he is the youngest scholarship player on this team, even though he's a sophomore. So he still has some growing to do.
Is that right?
As well. It's a mind-blowing fact. Yeah.
That.
It's crazy. So, I mean, he is really playing well right now this season compared to what I expected really coming in to the year too. That was a big spot. I looked at the 2-guard spot as, what is this going to be? Like, is Kobe, he wasn't playable as a freshman most of the time last year. Defensively, some of his offensive struggles, he couldn't hit open shots. He's still struggling with his jumper, but he can get to the rim now. I like Kobe. And then this transitions me into a point that I wish I brought up when you asked me that first question, is the leadership on this team. I think those two guys could be those types of guys for this program going forward. When you talk about the successful years over the last 15 for Michigan, they have, not to pump you up too much, but, they had a Stu Douglass, they had Zach Novak, Xavier Simpson, Charles Matthews. I'm leaving out tons of great, Trey Burke, guys like that, Tim. I'm leaving out a bunch of guys there, so I apologize. But, I don't feel like there's quite that guy, Eli Brooks, for the last couple of years. I don't think there's quite that guy on this team right now that's a stabilizing force. I was listening to Wayman Britt, who was on our podcast with John Borton. You know who Wayman Britt is, Stu?
Yeah.
I think you do.
Yeah.
So you won the Wayman Britt Defensive Player of the Year award at Michigan. So of course you know who he is. Yeah. And he was a dog back in the 70s for Michigan when they went to the final game against Indiana, won a Big Ten title in 1974. And he was saying the same thing. He just feels like there's not quite that alpha on this team. There's not quite that guy that's going to hold everyone accountable. You mentioned Livers, and I was talking about this earlier. It felt like he wasn't the most vocal guy. He was a super nice kid and still is, of course. But when they would zoom in on him, when you're watching a game on TV and things like that, he's getting into some of these guys. Him and Franz are talking to each other. Yeah. They're yelling at other guys, not in a bad way. And it just doesn't feel like there's kind of that accountability. And maybe it's because I'm thinking more on the defensive end here, but maybe it's because there's really not a plus defender on this team, maybe other than Kobe at times. So who are you to hold a guy accountable, right?
Right.
So that's part of the issue, I think, too. But I think those two guys, Kobe and Doug, down the road could be those types of guys for Michigan. So, but right now I think that's an issue, and there's no, sugarcoating that. I think, Hunter is a captain for you, but it's a little different as a big man, and he's got his own personality. I think they kind of need that alpha guy. Not calling him a beta by any means, but just that guy that gets everybody in line, I think is something that they're missing right now.
Yeah, I think Hunter, from what I've heard about Hunter, is he's more of a behind the scenes, like he's a good encourager. His teammates have said that. I guess maybe with his freshman year, you just kind of expect him to be a little more fiery going forward and confident.
Yeah.
Kind of that leading into being more vocal on the court, a la kind of a Novak style. Maybe just a little more, just overtly fiery. But I don't think that's the style. I think he's a very low-key kid, pretty chill guy, and he could still lead, but they do need a lot of that. I think some of it is there's, when you have like freshmen, I'm gonna put myself in if I were to be in this position, if I had like Jet and Doug on my team and they were playing with me, and you're in January, you're like, okay, they're still not grasping how to be in help side all the time, but we need them out there for 35 minutes to score. It's like, damn, can I yell at them every time in the game? But there has to be more of that for sure. They have to be held more accountable. I think though there's kind of handcuffed. I think there was some frustration last year with players with Caleb and Musa Diabate, similar situation. They had to play him. Yeah. And those are the two guys making the most mistakes because they're the youngest and they were the most inexperienced. And that's so difficult to deal with. I can only imagine the frustration that Eli Brooks had last year trying to deal with that all the time. This kid's making mistakes, get him out. Sorry, dude, we got to play them 35 minutes. And you have two of them on the team last year. And it's kind of similar this year. So
I feel like there are times when they could take Jet out and teach him a lesson, at times, sure. Not teach him a lesson, send a message.
Yeah.
Some of those times when he's playing zone, when everyone else is in man, or when he completely loses his guy. And Juwan does get into him when you watch him on the bench. It's even more noticeable when you're there in person.
Yeah.
But then he doesn't take him out, and maybe he should. But you're right. It's you take Jet out, and then what? Then who do you put in? Because this is a team, especially in the backcourt, as we kind of highlighted here, is really thin, especially at guard. So you take Jet out or you take Doug out. Then what do you do? I mean, maybe it's for 30 seconds until the next whistle or something like that.
Right.
Which I think maybe he could do more of. It's tough though. Yeah. I mean, so it's kind of playing through mistakes. He definitely lets him do that. Definitely on defense, especially this year with this team.
Yeah.
But I think it's just frustrating for people to watch when it feels helpless at times because you're not pulling a guy when he makes a mistake. So it's from a fan's perspective, it's get this guy out of here. But no, I mean, on offense, they need Jet if that offense is going to cook, they need Jet, they need Kobe, they need Doug in there. And so it's really tough. The only guy that gets pulled, it seems like lately, is Terrence Williams, who's had a rough year, but kind of feels like that's kind of where they're at. They're just handcuffed, like you said. I think it's a good way to put it.
Yeah, definitely. And it makes me excited for next year. Terrence, Jace, Hunter, and Hunter still has the capability to come back next year. And with some NIL stuff, it's who knows these nowadays. You don't know what deals they could get to come back. And he's got one more year to finish his degree. So those three being captains next year, possibly. I really would love to watch Terrence take a step up. I think Kobe and Doug will take steps up just from a skill and efficiency standpoint, just learning the game a little more. And I think Terrence, I said it last year. I said Terrence is going to be about this year. That Terrence this year would be a headache for teams to scout, because last year he was picking the right spots and he was knocking down threes and he had these games. And this year there was a little more responsibility on him and a little more pressure to make shots and start. So it's a little different role. I think he's still fully capable next year. I really do think he's going to take a step up and be even play the 3 at times for them when they can do it. They can have that capability of jet leaves, and we'll see who fills that role, what they do there. But yeah, it's exciting for this team, like for the future. But let's get into this year. I mean, the Big Ten is not great. Making an at large bid is probably not in the books. And if they win out, which they have the talent to, and the Big Ten's down, sure, anybody can make a run. But I feel like they have the talent, and that Big Ten tournament is just like a big flashing red light, I think, for them, like to just go up and snatch it. I don't know. I mean, I'm still not losing out complete hope because that Big Ten tournament's always there. But how hopeful are you with this team for that? I mean, at large bid is probably not in the books for you if you've been watching all season.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is like, what evidence do I have to go on to sit here and say like, this team's going to turn it around right now starting on Thursday? Like I think they can win tonight against Northwestern, but even then you got to string together a bunch of wins like that. And Michigan only has one true road win this year, and do even count a win over Minnesota in early December. Minnesota's playing better now, but that wasn't, really the same team at that point. So no, I don't have a ton to believe that they will. And I think they've dug a big enough hole that even if they did turn into a good team at the snap of a finger right now, there's still a big enough hole they have to climb out of that, there's really no margin for error. So yeah. I don't see an at-large bid happening. I wouldn't rule it out totally. But the Big Ten tournament's something where it kind of would bring me back to last year before the NCAA tournament, where you said, okay, this is an 11 seed. I thought they'd probably lose to Colorado State, honestly. But in hindsight, you're like, wait, in just about every matchup, Michigan's going to have the best player on the floor. They have, and let's talk about this too. The Big Ten tournament's in 5 weeks? Like, that's a lot of time for some of these younger guys, especially the guards, to make some strides, guys to figure out the roles. I feel like we're seeing a little more Joey Baker lately. I know Purdue, it was because Jet was out, but there's different roles being tried out. Terrence Williams getting a little less time. You're seeing more Terrace Reed. He's coming along. So there's some growth you can still do in this time frame. That's, the glass half. But the glass half empty is that this team hasn't really played. I mean, how many times have they played 40 minutes of really good basketball, let alone, 4 days in a row of really good basketball? So, while there is talent, that will always give you a chance, I think, because even in that Tennessee game in the tournament last year, Tennessee was the hottest team in the country at that point. But Michigan had Hunter Dickinson, and Eli Brooks is just a fifth-year senior at that point that's going to, be the most savvy guy out on the floor, the most steady, mentally stable guy on the floor. And, you had guys step up, hit shots, whatever. So we could see it happen, but I wouldn't bet on it. And, that's, I think, what's kind of disappointing for a lot of fans I talk to is over the years, this is kind of the time of year when Michigan starts rising up, and playing their best basketball. So maybe we'll see that. I remember in 2015 and then to a larger extent in 2016 when they did end up squeaking in there and making the tournament, where 2015 they ran out of time, but they were playing some good ball. Spike was at point guard. They had two freshmen in the starting lineup, and Beilein had those guys coming along where it's like, man, you can see some stuff here. So that would be the next thing is, you may not make the tournament, but you want to see growth. You want to see that these guys are developing because it is a young team, and you want to know that going into next year, you want a couple things that you can look back at from this year and say, we can build off of that.
Yeah, definitely. You want to keep going. I have no doubt in my mind Juwan will have them playing hard till the very last game. And then
he has to. And I think there's a little bit of I don't think this thing's going to spiral. I agree with you. But when you watch Sunday's Penn State game, they needed to come out desperate. And then it just felt like they didn't have that mental focus. They're losing shooters. I mean, Juwan said it, or Phil said it this week, Phil Martelli, where he was like, the number one thing going into that game was we cannot let them take threes. And they took a million threes and they made 13. And that's kind of, you get blown out. So for me, that was kind of a red flag a little bit, because it's you come off a tough loss. You don't want this thing to spiral. They've now lost 5 of 7. So he's got to keep this thing together, because that for next year too is going to go a long way. You can't have it where you're at the end of the year picking up the pieces.
No, for sure. And you never know when a guy can leave at any moment and transfer out, go pro, whatever the case may be. I wanted to ask you, kind of in that vein, about this Learfield NIL deal with Michigan, or the MDEN. But if you could briefly describe it to somebody who's literally just read a headline, what's going on here with this new deal?
Yeah, so it looks like University of Michigan partnering with Learfield, which is a huge sports marketing agency, as a lot of people know. They have the radio rights to all of Michigan's broadcasts. And it seems like, from what I've been able to gather on this, and doing a little more than reading the headline, I read the press release, so I did a little bit more, and had a couple conversations earlier about it, which is basically it's going to allow businesses to come to a guy, let's say it's Blake Corum on the football side, or Hunter Dickinson, and say like, hey, we want to do, let's say it's Meyer. We want to do an NIL deal with you. We'll put you on a billboard. You can be in a commercial, but we want you in your Michigan jersey so people know who you are, that sort of thing. They can now, Michigan basically is saying, hey, we trust Learfield enough to use the Block M, all the copyrights, things like that for the deal. Yeah, exactly. And they actually should be. And I think a lot of schools that were kind of throwing it out there right from the beginning, and maybe regretting that at this point, because you got to be, you have a brand to protect too. Like, not everything's for the, no offense to you basketball players and football players out there, but it's like, not everything's about you guys. Like,
right.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's something that's pretty big. And talking to somebody who's tied in with one of the collectives today, I said, is this a big deal or not? I didn't know. And they said, no, this is pretty good. We feel good about this. And they've collectives have met with Learfield too. So they're trying to get everybody on the same page. And Michigan's been slow to react in NIL, but they've taken some positive steps lately. I mean, Ward Manuel, I thought it was a big step that he even acknowledged the collectives exist. I mean, that's one thing. So they're starting to make some progress, it seems like. And that'll help with keeping a guy like Hunter Dickinson around, or keeping, Jet Howard probably is fine on the money side, but you want to keep guys around. He can make his own money now and everything. So yeah, I think it's a pretty significant development, and you continue to hear behind the scenes that there are other things in the works too. So I'm not going to oversell it and say it's the biggest deal in the world, but I'm not going to say it's nothing either. I think it's it's a good step.
It's one of the funniest developments of my entire life, that people talking about how NIL is going to ruin basketball. And literally when it started, I'm like, I don't think you guys understand. You're going to keep guys that you want to stay there. This is like the very beginning. And sure enough, I heard from a buddy who knows within the IU basketball program, was like, yeah, they just looked at Trace Jackson Davis's prospects for next year. This was talking about before this season started. What his contract would look like with G League, and then they just matched that and paid him a little more or something. And it's like, wow, that's amazing. You can keep a really talented guy in college basketball, and your fan base benefits, and the kid still plays hard and is not like, it's not like distracting and taking him away from the game of basketball. Like, I think it's a really beautiful thing that's happened with all of this, and I think Hunter is right for that. So this deal, hopefully they can source that. If not, I don't know what Hunter is already sourcing by himself. But that this should help, being able to be like, Meyer, it helps that Meyer's going to say, they'll come to Hunter because you're wearing the Block M, not just Hunter Dickinson. Like, it does help to sell that. Yeah. So that could be a really, really big deal. I would say, football team, I guess so, but definitely with a guy like this, it's a perfect storm for this.
Yeah, and I think too, going off of what you're saying, like, I'm not a huge fan of NIL. Like, I like NIL and how it's supposed to be intended for, where it's like Hunter Dickinson can go out and get a deal. I think he has one with Outback Steakhouse, and I'm sure he has agents that helped him with that and stuff. That's fantastic. But the collective stuff, and like, I know people associated with these, so like, it's no knock on them. They're doing what they need to do, but it wasn't necessarily intended for that. But what I will say is, you're right. It's not only bringing guys back to a sport that we love. Look at the big guys that have come back this year in college basketball. Oscar Tshiebwe, I think, was the first National Player of the Year to come back and play the next season since Tyler Hansbrough. That was a long time ago. Yeah, Drew Timme, Hunter Dickinson, Armando Bacot for North Carolina, even Caleb Love for North Carolina.
Yeah.
He was not a big guy, but is a great player in his own right. You're bringing guys back, and the parents will love this too. You're incentivizing getting a degree, right? I mean, it's like, well, why wouldn't I come back?
Right.
Because I don't have to wait on making any sort of money. And I know Hunter said last summer that maybe he was going to look at graduating in 3. So, like, even if he doesn't come back, he may have, come back this year when he wasn't otherwise going to come back, and he may end up with his degree after 3 years. So, I mean, I think Michigan fans hope he stays, but there's a lot of good to NIL too, that I think people, and like giving back, tons of guys are doing that too. So yeah, there's some positives there for sure. And it's not all, crumbling, as some people would have you believe,
Listen, I hated graduating in 4 years. I never wanted to go to class. But if I had any type of like money that made me college rich, there's no way I'd graduate in 3 years. There's no way I'd be busting my ass for that many credits throughout this season. Now, if you took summer classes, which I never did, maybe, but man, with that type of money, I'd be chilling. That would be impressive if you could do it. I guess we'll see what that looks like. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting for sure. Changes a lot of things as well as the transfer portal. My big thing is, what can Juwan pick up in the transfer portal from a wing standpoint? And what do they need? Definitely some depth. I think they realize that. But I want to get into you before we get out of here a little bit. Let's talk about Clayton Sayfie, the man. You've been covering Michigan. You said 6 years, is that right?
4.
Okay, 4 years. So you've been, now, was that the last Beilein year or the first Juwan year?
So I came in with Juwan Howard. Yeah, okay. Basically. So,
okay. Have you heard any good Beilein stories from guys? I'm sure they've had some good ones. That's put you on the spot, but that's interesting because I'm sure you've asked.
No, for sure. Got some good Beilein stories. I mean, a lot of them are the ones when I'm listening to like you guys talk about him and what you run in the gauntlet or whatever it's called, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I will tell you a great John Beilein story that involves me personally. So, big Michigan fan growing up, as we kind of talked about earlier, and I'm at the 2013 Big Ten tournament, and we're at the team hotel after Michigan had just lost a disappointing game to Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. So the guys are going in, they're getting off the bus, they're going to their rooms, they're getting their stuff, and they're getting on the bus, and they're going home to Ann Arbor in Chicago. And so Beilein standing there, there are some fans gathered around. He comes up to, me, my brother, one of our buddies, and my dad, and he was like, thanks for coming out, guys. Sorry we didn't get the result that we wanted. But the beauty of college basketball is next week is a whole new season. And so we'll see what happens there. Michigan was 6-6 in their last 12 games going into that tournament. Then they go to the national title game. Yeah. And I'll never forget that, how everyone kind of knew that, or at least he knew, and he had been doing it for so many years, that like, hey, it's clean slate starting next week. And then I remember also the look on Mitch McGary's face where he was totally cool. Like, they had just lost. Like, it felt like a tough loss. They lost on Friday of the Big Ten tournament. Yeah. You expected to get further based on how the season had kind of gone. And, he didn't seem discouraged at all. Maybe that's just how Mitch is, right? But I thought that was interesting. And looking back on it, it's like, oh, it all kind of made a little bit of sense. And then the second one would be just getting the chance to I've met him a couple of times over the years, including that one, but last year at a Pistons game before, just how gracious he was when our staff came out there. He actually got us tickets, and nice. We were able to talk to him before the game and just kind of see what he's doing now with the Pistons. But yeah, just an all-time dude that I enjoyed. It really, Michigan basketball, it wouldn't be where it is even now without, or anywhere near it, or the memories that we've all had because of him and guys like, that he brought in and guys that played under him like yourself. So that's kind of the genesis, I would say, of me becoming a huge, follower of Michigan basketball, was those John Beilein years. And like we talked about earlier, the rise to it, like the first NCAA tournament that they really made a run was that one. And, I mean, it's stuff like that you'll kind of always remember.
Oh yeah, that's cool. I mean, I remember that lines up with how I observed Beilein all year in 2013. Like he would just sit down the whole game and kind of have his hand on his chin and just kind of chill there. And I'm like, who is this guy? At all times during my career, just the last year, he was just screaming the entire time. And Stuart, get over here. You got to, and it's like he knew that they were good enough for it then. And he pretty much chilled out and kind of chilled out a little more and more. I'm waiting for Juwan to get there. Juwan's a very intense guy.
Yeah.
Pressers are intense. He's very guarded. And I think he's building his confidence, or eventually he'll build his confidence and start to relax. It's a key thing for college coaches. It's an interesting topic, and we won't get into it, but Beilein, when he stopped micromanaging so much and had confidence in others, is when the flip switched. And obviously it helped to have all those NBA guys in the 2013 team and then build from there, but that's a whole other story.
He brought him in though.
Yeah. Those are cool. Those are very good stories. I like that. I'm last question. I'm curious, 4 years now. So, disregarding any experience you had before that as a fan, what's been your favorite live moment now covering the game, or maybe some other moment covering Michigan basketball in the last 4 years now you've been doing it?
That's a great question. I would say probably,
it can be a personal thing. It doesn't have to be about the basketball team either.
I'll say a couple of things. One, from a coverage standpoint, a couple of years ago, just thinking about that team that made the run to the Elite Eight and lost to UCLA. Yeah. Just kind of that being, I think that was the second team that I'd covered, and it was on Zoom, but just the character of those guys, I thought was, and just the personalities on that team was super fun to follow. So that whole season overall, and then last year being at the Tennessee game that brought Michigan to a fifth straight Sweet 16.
I was there.
There was just, you were there. Okay.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I mean, was there just something special about that environment? Like, it was the first tournament back with like fully fans and everything. It felt like, Michigan, Tennessee, they're both close enough to get to Indy. Yep. And then did you stick around for the St. Pete's? Who did they play?
I booked
Murray State.
Yeah,
you should have. That was incredible. It might have been just as good of an environment. And I was like, man, this is awesome. And getting to talk to the guys like after the game and everything, and being like, that was the first tournament I'd covered in person. So it was like, okay, this is pretty sweet. And it just kind of was one of those things too that reminds you that, like, oh yeah, it's March. Like, this is, kind of Michigan's time, it feels like lately. I mean, 5 straight Sweet 16s is crazy.
Yeah.
So I'd say it's probably those couple things, just kind of, getting to interact with these guys and, seeing the character that both Juwan and Beilein brought in, and then just seeing the environment in a March Madness game like that's pretty sweet.
Yeah. That Tennessee game was awesome. That was my first Michigan game I'd been to ever, actually. So that was cool. But Clayton, man, I appreciate you. This was great. I'm excited to read your stuff going forward. We'll have to have you back on the podcast, maybe at the end of this year, in the summer, or next year. We'll talk about anything and everything. This was awesome. So I appreciate you. Where can we find your stuff? Tell everybody where we can find you.
Yeah, just head to thewolverine.com for all the people out there. We got our message board over there. We got all sorts of articles, football, basketball, recruiting. So go and do that. And then I'm on Twitter at CSayf23, CSAYF23. Haven't changed it for a long time, so that's still my Twitter at. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, I appreciate it, man, having me on. I was thrilled when I got the DM. As I told you via DM, I was like, hey, you had me at hello. So I appreciate it.
That's the first time I heard that, so I love that. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no, so that was this has been awesome. So appreciate it anytime. Yep. We'll have to do it again. And I appreciate everyone out there listening. Till next time. See you later.